Welcome to the Content Amplified podcast, brought to you by Masset. Our goal is to help you get more from your marketing content. Each episode is a 10 to 15 minute interview with industry experts that share amazing insights to help you squeeze as much juice from your content as you possibly can. Here's today's interview.
Welcome back to another episode of Content Amplified. Today I'm joined by Brian. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ben. It's great to be here.
Yeah, Brian, I'm excited for this episode. I think there's a lot of great material. But Brian, before we get going, let's get to know you. Tell us about your career, and then 2 questions we ask every guest. What do you love about content, and what do you love about marketing?
That sounds great, Ben. Yeah, it's nice to be with you today. I have worked in marketing for about 15 years. Most of my roles have been focused on marketing that drives revenue generation through performance marketing and demand generation programs. I have a lot of experience in digital marketing, and I've focused my time over the last 15 years on the small business customer segment. So that's a segment that's near and dear to my heart, and one that I love. Content is a very big term, but I really think that it is the most valuable asset of a marketing program. I have had the advantage in my career to work for large brands, middle-sized company brands, and I've also started my own company. And so as it relates to that, I've had very large 8-digit marketing budgets. I've had thin 6-figure marketing budgets, and I've had the marketing budget that comes out of my own wallet. And so as I've traversed that set of experiences, I've become more and more appreciative of the value of powerful content. If you have a very large marketing budget, sometimes that can mask mediocre content. Mediocre content cannot be masked when you have a small or, a very small budget, right? A micro budget. And so as I've traversed through my marketing career, I've become more and more appreciative of the value of powerful content. And I'll talk more about that as part of this conversation. And I moved from a career in management consulting to a career in marketing because I wanted to be closer to the customer. And so that's what I love most about marketing is, in order to be a great marketer, you really need to understand your customer and how your brand can best serve those customers.
I love it. Well, Brian, I am so excited for this conversation. Today, we're going to kind of talk about some of the KPIs of content, really go through the framework of how to look at content, how to measure it, how to really work on it, set goals for it, things like that. What is content used for? Like what's the purpose of content, and how does that kick us off on this framework?
So Ben, when I think about content strategy, I think that there are 3 jobs that can be done by content. Content can entertain, it can inform, and it can persuade. And now I do think that a single piece of content can do more than one of those jobs. I think it's a really tall order for it to do all 3 of those jobs. So when I think about a good content strategy, I like to think about what is the purpose of the content that I am developing. When I think about entertainment, what is the strategic value to the company from entertainment content? It is to build your brand awareness, right? So if you're a new brand, an emerging brand, and nobody knows who you are, content that entertains is really important in building your funnel at the topmost level. When I think about content that informs, or you could also call that education-based content, it really is about establishing your brand relevance, right? So you're proving to your audience that I have domain expertise in this area through content that informs. And then, of course, when you think about content that persuades, that really is about driving purchase intent for your products and services.
I love it. So with those 3 different buckets in mind, how do we start to look at the KPIs of content? What does that look like? How do we really recognize it? For a lot of companies, it's really difficult. How do you really wrap your head around it? And what have you seen to be successful in the past?
So before I talk about the specific KPIs, I want to talk about the importance of stakeholder alignment. You need to start the process of strategy formulation by dialing up and thinking about what is the challenges for this business that I serve, and where can content play an outsized role in addressing those challenges. So as I mentioned a minute ago, if you're a newer brand and your target buyer population is not aware of your brand, then of course the role that content can play is around driving brand awareness. If, in contrast, you're an established brand, but you're seeing that you're losing out to your competition more frequently, then you either need to improve the relevance of the brand or be more persuasive about the value proposition of the brand, right? So think at the most macro level first about the challenges that the company faces and where content can quote unquote plug the gap, right? Once you do that, then I go with a recommendation to key stakeholders and say that here is how I see the challenges of the company. And as a result of that, I propose a content strategy that focuses most in this area, secondarily in this area, and less so in this area. And then you assign weighted proportions to each components of those strategy, right? So I'll just go back to the example of a new organization that has a brand awareness challenge. I would go in and say, we're going to put 50% of our time and investment in that category, 30% of our time and investment in the education category or information category, and 20% of our time and resources into the persuasion category, right? Or even better yet, I think the more differentiated the weights can be, the better, right? So even like 60, 30, 10 is probably the best weighting in my opinion. As best you can, don't do a third, right? Because if you're going to do a third, then everything's a problem and wins are often not as powerful, right? That's the way I think about the strategic process before you get to specific KPIs. Once you start thinking about your specific KPIs, I like to think about what are high, medium, and high value actions related to that category. So for example, when it comes to addressing the challenge of brand awareness and therefore coming up with a content strategy around entertaining to build awareness for the brand. Low value actions are likes, medium value actions are shares, and really high value actions are reposts, right? If I find a piece of content so entertaining that I'm not going to just share it with individuals, a medium value action, but I'm going to actually promote it to everyone who's connected to me, that's a very high value action. So I think about low, medium, and high value actions in each of these categories. And for the highest priority area, I think you need to go after the medium and high value actions, right? So again, going back to this example, if you're addressing the brand awareness challenge and you put 60% of the weight of your strategy and 60% of the value of your scorecard in the entertainment category, I would make the primary KPI the shares and reposts, right? Because it's a very high value action. When it comes to the lower priority parts of your strategy, I think it's okay because you're putting less time and resources and dollars in those categories to track to low and medium value actions, right? So that's the way I think about scorecard development. As I mentioned a minute ago, alignment with your stakeholders and debating up front before you go to market with your strategy and aligning on the weighted scorecard is critically important.
I love that. And there's so much to unpack there. I love how you're getting that internal alignment and saying, hey, does everyone agree we have this awareness problem? Okay, awesome. The solution for that is entertainment. So this is what's going to be the bulk. Here's how we're going to measure that. Here are the goals for that content. Everyone aligned with it. We're not going to be saying in every piece of content, buy now, buy now, buy now. That's not the intent. Is everyone okay with that? And I love that alignment before you even get anywhere to metrics and things like that. Super important because I think that will save you a lot of heartache in the long run if you actually get that buy-in from day one.
I think, Ben, it also elevates the strategic value of the content team, right? Unfortunately, in a lot of organizations, the content team can be a bit subservient to other parts of the marketing department and other parts of the organization. But this really, by going through this process, which does take a little extra time, I acknowledge, you are elevating the strategic importance of the content team, not just to the marketing department, but to the entire organization.
I love that. That's awesome. So Brian, how does distribution play a role when it comes to the content at the various levels and KPIs and everything else?
Yeah. As a performance marketer, I love the distribution piece. So I've spent a lot of my time on distribution. I'll start with a very basic point, which is you need to think about these jobs to be done and which channels are best for that. So for example, TikTok is a great channel for entertaining content. LinkedIn is a great platform for information content. YouTube is a great channel for persuasive content. That's table stakes. You need to make sure that your distribution strategy is aligned to the jobs that your content is tasked with doing. But I also like to think about first mover advantage in a channel. And there are a few flavors to first mover advantage that I'll talk through. But with first mover advantage, there's so many platforms are so crowded with brands today that it's hard to stand out. It's like being in a loud college party. And even if you're screaming at your top of your lungs, it's hard to get noticed, right? So I really like to think about first mover advantage. Now, of course, a first mover advantage could be going to a brand new net new platform. So for example, if you remember at the beginning of the pandemic, and I think they've waned a little bit now, but Clubhouse was a really hot emerging emerging platform, right? So you certainly marketers should be aware of the landscape of different platforms that are emerging and where they might want to go as a brand. But there are other dimensions to first mover advantage as well. So for example, and this is usually something that can be taken advantage of by larger brands that have top priority with large advertising platforms, but platforms often open up additional real estate for marketers, right? So for example, in one of my previous roles, I was able to take advantage of advertising real estate when it first became available in Instagram stories.
Very
and
cool.
First mover advantage really was quite powerful. Our early campaigns in that real estate were extraordinarily high performing as more advertisers entered that real estate. Even though our content was very similar, the performance waned just because there was more diversification of attention in that channel. I also like to think about, as a brand, are there untraditional channels that I might use where I would have a first mover advantage? For example, LinkedIn is known predominantly as a B2B channel, right? But as LinkedIn evolves, might I think if I have a value proposition for busy professionals as a B2C brand, might I think about LinkedIn as a platform? Because I'll stand out, right? So for example, if you think about what B2C categories might be valuable to professionals who are spending their time on LinkedIn: travel, taking a break from work, relaxing with my family. Maybe an airline or a hotel brand could start to take advantage of that platform. Or, staying fit because I'm working 60 hours a week can be a challenge. So maybe a connected fitness brand could do well in that channel. You always have to present your brand in the context of the audience, right? And so everyone who, is a B2C target is also a consumer, but they're on LinkedIn in more of a professional mindset. So you have to present your brand to them in a professional context. But I think B2C brands can start to consider traditional B2B channels to break through. They'll stand out because there aren't a lot of B2C brands on those channels. So I always like to, when I think about content distribution, I of course want to align channel selection with the job to be done of the content that has been designed to do that job. But I also like to think about, where can I have a first mover advantage?
I love that. I love those 2 points and how those can really fuel the strategy of of content distribution. I love that. Okay, one final question because we're getting close to the end.
Yeah.
AI.
Yeah.
What does AI have to do with all of this stuff? And what are your thoughts on this new technology and how it's impacting content and everything in general?
Yeah. There has been an absolute proliferation of AI-based services. I recently started a business, Reclaim Saturday, to help busy professionals understand this landscape, which is rapidly evolving. And even though I've been dedicating hours of my time to it, it's hard for even me to stay on top of all of these new services, AI-based services that are becoming available. But here's what I would say is that when you think about content, I would say that AI, if it's taking the lead role, it's really quite good now at the information category. It can create good information-based content. It is only of sort of mixed quality when it comes to persuasive content. And I think it's too early days for it to be good at entertainment content, right? So that's generally my assessment of where AI, performs from a content development perspective as it relates to these jobs to be done. When you come back to this strategic approach that I've talked to you about in terms of determining where the weight of your attention should go based on the challenges that your company faces, I really think that whatever you put your most weight on, have that be a heavily human-led process. Maybe you would use AI-based solutions to tweak a piece to be a little bit better for SEO, or potentially create some graphics for the piece. But really, that should be, in my opinion, a very strongly human-led process. Given where we are in the current state of development with AI-based services. I really do think that people should think about, for these lower weight areas of content marketing, maybe letting AI do a heavier part of the lift, right? So, and again, it's not phenomenal at all of these categories, but if you only have 10% of the weighting of your strategy in one particular area, I would say try your best, at least over time, to get AI to do 50% of that job and focus as much of your time and your team's time in the area that carries the most strategic weight.
I love that. I think that's a cool way of thinking about it. I love where your priority, the biggest impact, your main objective, very human-led, but the other things that have to be done, even though they're not the focus, it's kind of table stakes at this point in time. Yeah. Let AI do as much heavy lifting as possible. I think that's really cool. Brian, I've learned a ton. I think this is an amazing conversation. I love everything you've shared. I think it was really fascinating. I love the framework. I'm sure people will have questions though. How and where can they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn, Brian Coleman on LinkedIn, or they can email me at brian.h.coleman@gmail.com.
Love it. Again, Brian, thank you so much for your time and your insights today.
It was great to be here, Ben.
Thank you for listening to the Content Amplified podcast. Please subscribe and leave us a review. And for additional ways to get more out of your content, visit our website at getmasset.com. That's getmasset.com. And tune in next time to the Content Amplified podcast.